Happy birthday, America. Now, upon this 4th of July, 2018, we should honor all of the American soldiers throughout our history that have kept our country free and protected it. And we should honor them with a moment of silence. Now, no matter what cause they fought for, American soldiers who were led, and now there have been bad leaders and bad generals in our history, but American soldiers were always the ones who sacrificed. Always the ones who were willing to give up everything and did give up everything a lot of the time. So they were always honorable when they had this spirit of sacrifice. And most American soldiers have. Now, thinking of sacrifice, trying to understand what a soldier's sacrifice is, but also how we can sacrifice in our own lives. I'd like to read this Hindu tale. Now, this is an old Hindu tale. It's not an American tale, but it is, I'm reading it from Karma Yoga by Swami Vivekananda, but I've heard it in other sources. And it's a story about sacrifice, about how even in our lives as householders, we can sacrifice. And now, even soldiers would be considered householders a lot of the time because they were protecting their homeland. And then, of course, there was the other side, who renounced the world and sought God completely. And this king in this story inquires to every kind of renunciate, a sannyasin, who comes to his court to basically see if they have any knowledge about which it is better to be, a sannyasin or a householder. Sannyasin is a form of renunciate, a lot of the time at the end of the life. But the householder is one who works in the world, who usually has a family, who tries to provide for his family, for his neighbors, and for the people at large. Good householders. And these two, there are a lot more sections in society, and even old Hindu society, that I'm not going to go into. But for this purposes, we will examine this story and see the difference between a sannyasin and a householder, and how everyone's duty is particular to them. No one is particularly better or worse, but we should always have a spirit of sacrifice. And this story really gets to the heart of that, and it's more of an analogy, so it's not literal, but I feel it has a lot of great potential for wisdom if you spin it around in your head. Now, let's begin. A certain king used to inquire of all the sannyasins that came to his country, which is the greater man, he who gives up the world and becomes a sannyasin, or he who lives in the world and performs his duties as a householder? Many wise men sought to solve the problem. Some asserted that the sannyasin was the greater, upon which the king demanded that they should prove their assertion. When they could not, he ordered them to marry and become householders. Then others came and said, the householder who performs his duties is the greater man. Of them, too, the king demanded proofs. When they could not give them, he made them also settle down as householders. At last there came a young sannyasin, and the king similarly inquired of him also. He answered, each, O king, is equally great in his place. Prove this to me, asked the king. I will prove it to you, said the sannyasin, but you must first come and live as I do for a few days, that I may be able to prove to you what I say. The king consented, and followed the sannyasin out of his own territory and passed through many other countries until they came to a great kingdom. In the capital of the kingdom, a great ceremony was going on. The king and the sannyasin heard the noise of drums and music, and heard also the criers. The people were assembled in the streets in gala dress, and a great proclamation was being made. The king and the sannyasin stood there to see what was going on. The crier was proclaiming loudly that the princess, daughter of the king of that country, was about to choose a husband from among those assembled before her. It was an old custom in India for princesses to choose husbands in this way. Each princess had certain ideas of the sort of man she wanted for a husband. Some would have the handsomest man. Others would have only the most learned. Others again the richest, and so on. All the princes of the neighborhood put on their bravest attire, and presented themselves before her. Sometimes they too had their own criers to emulate their advantages, and the reasons why they hoped the princess would choose them. The princess was taken round a throne in the most splendid array, and looked at and heard about them. If she was not pleased with them, with what she saw and heard, she said to her bearers, move on. and no more notice was the princess given to them. And as she went, the princess was not pleased with any one of them. But if she was, she would throw a garland of flowers over him, and he would become her husband. The princess of the country to which our king and the sannyasin had come was having one of these interesting ceremonies. She was the most beautiful princess in the world, and the husband of the princess would be ruler of the kingdom after her father's death. The idea of this princess was to marry the handsomest man, but she could not find the right one to please her. Several times these meetings had taken place, but the princess could not select a husband. This meeting was the most splendid of all. More people than ever had to come to it. The princess came in on a throne, and the bearers carried her from place to place. She did not seem to care for anyone, and everyone became disappointed that this meeting also was going to be a failure. Just then came a young man, a sannyasin, handsome as if the sun had come down to the earth, and stood in one corner of the assembly watching what was going on. The throne with the princess came near him, and as soon as she saw the beautiful sannyasin, she stopped and threw the garland over him. The young sannyasin seized the garland and threw it off, exclaiming, "What nonsense is this? I am a sannyasin. What is marriage to me?" The king of that country thought that perhaps this man was poor and so dared not marry the princess, and said to him, "With my daughter goes half my kingdom now, and the whole kingdom after my death," and put the garland again on the sannyasin. The young man threw it off once more, saying, "Nonsense. I do not want to marry," and walked quickly away from the assembly. Now the princess had fallen so much in love with this young man, that she said, "I must marry this man or I shall die." And she went after him to bring him back. Then our other sannyasin, who had brought the king there, said to him, the original king that he had brought to this foreign kingdom, "King, let us follow this pair." So they walked after them, but at a good distance behind. The young sannyasin who had refused to marry the princess walked out into the country for several miles, when he came to a forest and entered into it. The princess followed him, and the other two followed them. Now this young sannyasin was well acquainted with that forest and knew all the intricate paths in it. He suddenly passed into one of these and disappeared, and the princess could not discover him. After trying for a long time to find him, she sat down under a tree and began to weep, for she did not know the way out. Then our king and the other sannyasin came up to her and said, "Do not weep. We will show you the way out of this forest, but it is too dark for us to find it now. Here is a big tree. Let us rest under it, and in the morning we will go early and show you the road." Now a little bird and his wife and their 3 little ones lived on that tree in a nest. This little bird looked down and saw the 3 people under the tree and said to his wife, "My dear, what shall we do? Here are some guests in the house, and it is winter, and we have no fire." For Hindus, it's very important to feed guests and make them comfortable, not only because it could be God coming to you in another form, which God takes many forms and is all forms, so it always is. But it's also a spirit of sacrifice, sacrificing something to someone in need. "My dear," and then the bird picks up here, "My dear, what shall we do? Here are some guests in the house, and it is winter, and we have no fire," the house being the tree. So he flew away and got a bit of burning firewood in his beak, and dropped it before the guests, to which they added fuel and made a blazing fire. But the little bird was not satisfied. He said again to his wife, "My dear, what shall we do? There is nothing to give these people to eat, and they are hungry. We are householders. It is our duty to feed anyone who comes to the house. I must do what I can. I will give them my body." So he plunged into the midst of the fire and perished. The guests saw him falling and tried to save him, but he was too quick for them. The little bird's wife saw what her husband did, and she said, "Here are 3 persons, and only 1 little bird for them to eat." And then the wife bird, "It is not enough. It is my duty as a wife not to let my husband's efforts go in vain. Let them have my body also." Then she fell into the fire and was burned to death. Then the 3 baby birds, when they saw what was done, and that there was still not enough food for the 3 guests, said, "Our parents have done what they could, and still it is not enough. It is our duty to carry on the work of our parents. Let our bodies go too." And they all dashed into the fire also. Amazed at what they saw, the 3 people could not, of course, eat these birds. They passed the night without food, And in the morning the king and the sannyasin showed the princess the way, and she went back to her father. Then the sannyasin said to the king, "King, you have seen that each is great in his own place. If you want to live in the world, live like those birds, ready at any moment to sacrifice yourself for others. If you want to renounce the world, be like the young man whom the most beautiful woman in a kingdom were as nothing. If you want to be a householder, hold your life a sacrifice for the welfare of others, as if you choose the life, and if you choose the life of a renunciate, do not even look at beauty and money and power. Each is great in his own place, but the duty of the one is not the duty of the other." Now, all of the brave soldiers throughout the history of the United States of America, many of them have given their lives, and many others fought bravely. Of course, there were some that did not, and were not, did things to innocent people that were terrible. But the vast majority of American soldiers acted bravely, and tonight we honor the sacrifice of those brave soldiers and the ones who fought by their side and lived on afterwards. We honor these men, and we pay homage to them. And I think that this story gets to the heart of the spirit of sacrifice, that which we should all have in our own way, in our own duties. If we work in the world, if we make money for our family and sacrifice a lot of our time to make that money, then sacrifice more of our time to be with our family, spend time with them, then that can be our sacrifice. That also means that if we see somebody in need, that somebody else is threatening, or somebody that's starving, we should definitely help them, even at risk to our own lives, if somebody is attacking somebody else. So we should always have this spirit of sacrifice. But it is not for all of us to sacrifice our lives in war. For most of us, for most householders, we sacrifice our time, our duty, what we want out of life, preferring to do good by our parents and friends and community. These things are all sacrifices. And I think that many soldiers have died so that we can live these lives. And we should honor them with this spirit of sacrifice, continued it in our hearts always. So, no matter what you're doing on this 4th of July, and even if you're not American, let's think of all the people who have sacrificed their lives in wars and in their lives. And consider how we can do better, how we can sacrifice like those. Maybe some of us will become soldiers. Maybe some of us will sacrifice our time and effort for those around us, our family, friends, and community. But whatever you do, make sure you have an understanding of your duty and an understanding of sacrifice. Be the best version of yourself. And the way to do that is to be willing to sacrifice for others, whatever it is that you sacrifice. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be including a little clip at the end of this of a little celebration that we usually do on 4th of July. It's a very small little thing, but I thought I might put it in there for anybody interested. Fireworks are kind of a big thing. Beer is kind of a big thing on 4th of July a lot of the time. But regardless, just keep sacrificing your mind, and keep those who have sacrificed for their country in your mind as well. Thank you very much for watching. All of you. Have a great 4th of July and great lives. Set, go.
There it is. Oh, that was good.
Hey, a piece of that hit me in the cheek.
A rock.
It's probably a rock.
A rock.